In the spring of 2017, inside a warehouse on the east side of Los Angeles, a 35-year-old man pulled a toilet out of a portable bathroom with his bare hands. He had no government grant, no nonprofit budget, no corporate sponsor. He had a used porta-potty picked up at a surplus auction for $100, a set of basic hand tools, and an idea that everyone around him would have laughed at if he tried to explain it out loud. By the time he was done, that plastic shell, the same kind of unit you walk past at a street fair and hold your breath inside, had become a fully functional home. A fold-up bed, a mini fridge, a kitchenette, a solar panel on the roof, a door with a lock, a home for under $200. That same week, the federal government was spending an average of $700,000 per unit to build permanent supportive housing for homeless Americans in California. $700,000, one unit, one person housed. Eventually, after years of permits and committees and environmental reviews, versus $200, one porta-potty, one weekend, one person housed tonight. That gap between what a volunteer with a power drill can build in a single weekend and what a billion-dollar program takes a decade to produce is exactly what this video is about. Because once you understand it, you cannot look at American homelessness the same way again. By the end of this video, you will understand three things mainstream coverage almost never explains. First, exactly how this conversion works, what it costs, what it takes, and why a retired porta-potty is one of the most structurally sound raw materials available for under $100 in America today. Second, why the government keeps trying to shut these projects down, and why ordinary Americans keep winning that fight. Third, you will meet the people living in these homes right now, not as statistics, as people, with names, with histories, with specific things they said the first time they locked a door that belonged entirely to them. This is not a story about charity. It is a story about what happens when Americans stop waiting for permission. In January 2025, the federal government counted 745,000 homeless Americans. Let that number sit for a moment before we move on. 745,000 people with nowhere to sleep on any given night, not in between apartments, not couch surfing temporarily. Nowhere, outside or in a shelter cot, or in a car with the windows fogged up from breathing. That is more people than live in the entire city of Seattle. Every neighborhood, every apartment building, every house, every child's bedroom, empty. Everyone outside on the pavement tonight. Now add this. Nearly 150,000 of those 745,000 were children. Let that one sit too. Children. Not runaways, not teenagers who made bad choices. Children doing homework from shelter cots, from car back seats, from cousins' living room floors, waking up every morning without knowing where they would sleep that night. Over 1 million public school students across the country lacked stable housing entirely. California alone accounted for more than 161,000 homeless residents. In Los Angeles, the homeless population had climbed 75% over 8 years. In Silicon Valley, the wealthiest technology corridor on Earth, where the world's most valuable companies are headquartered, the number of people living full-time in vehicles had more than doubled since the pandemic. And through all of it, the official response remained the same. Apply here. Wait here. Fill out this form. Come back next month. The system will help you. Just wait. The average wait for permanent supportive housing in Los Angeles in 2024 was between 2 and 4 years. Not 2 to 4 weeks, 2 to 4 years. Sleeping outside every night, while your application moved through a bureaucracy that cost more to operate than most small countries spend on housing entirely. That is the world TK Devine was watching from inside that warehouse. And that is the world that made what he did next feel not just possible, but necessary. TK Devine was 35 and working odd jobs across Los Angeles. He was also a writer with a years-long obsession with radical simplicity in housing, and his interest was never academic. He had spent years deliberately living out of his truck and a former office space, skipping rent entirely, so he could understand from the inside what a person actually needs to survive, and what a person needs to still feel human. He watched the tent cities expand. He watched the official response spend more and produce less. And then one day, driving past a construction site, he looked at a row of decommissioned porta-potties waiting to be hauled away, and saw something nobody else was seeing. Rental companies upgrade their fleets constantly. The older units nobody wants get sold at government surplus auctions on sites like GovPlanet and GovDeals. The most beat-up units go for $100, sometimes $75, sometimes $50 if you haul it yourself. A decommissioned porta-potty is not a toilet. Strip the fixture out, and what remains is a UV-resistant plastic shell designed to survive years of outdoor exposure. It is watertight, structurally reinforced, lightweight enough to sit on a small trailer, and it already has a door with a latch and a ventilation system built into the roof. It is already halfway to being a building. The only thing missing is the interior. Devine bought a wheelchair-accessible unit, roughly 8 feet by 8 feet inside, for $100. He pulled the toilet out, pressure washed the interior, sealed the walls, and started building inward. The bed frame folds up against the wall during the day. A mini fridge sits under the sleeping platform. A 100-watt solar panel on the roof powers the interior lights, and a charging station. The whole unit sits on a trailer and needs nothing more than a garden hose connection for water. Total material cost, under $200. Devine told CBS Los Angeles that he could fit his 6'1" frame comfortably on the bed, shoes off, the way his mama taught him. The door locked from the inside. The solar lights came on at dusk. He called it a porta-home. Here is exactly what it costs. Itemized, decommissioned wheelchair-accessible porta-potty from a surplus auction, $100. Sometimes $75, sometimes $50. Closed cell foam board insulation for walls and floor, $45. Fold-up bed frame with wall mount hardware, $35, sourced from used furniture listings or a Habitat for Humanity restore. 100-watt solar panel from a used marine supplier, $55. Charge controller, deep cycle marine battery, and 2 LED lights, $40. Door seal, weather stripping, latch hardware, and exterior paint, $25. Total $175 to $195, not $175,000, not $17,500, $175. Less than most Americans spend on groceries in a month. Less than a single night in a Los Angeles hotel. Roughly 1/4 of what the city of Los Angeles spends per person per night on emergency shelter services. 1/4 the nightly cost of a government shelter bed versus a one-time $190 investment that produces a permanent, private, lockable home. That is not advocacy. That is arithmetic. A musician named Elvis Summers was walking through South Los Angeles when he noticed a 60-year-old grandmother named Irene McGee sleeping in the dirt next to an apartment building. Everyone called her Smokey. She had been homeless for over 10 years. People knew her by name. They waved on the way to their cars. And every single night, they went inside their warm homes while she stayed in the dirt. One day, Summers went to a hardware store, spent less than $500 on lumber, and built an 8-foot wooden house on wheels right there on the sidewalk. A door with a lock, a window, just enough room to sleep safely off the ground. He posted the build video to YouTube. 5.7 million views. His GoFundMe raised over $100,000. He built 37 tiny homes and gave them away across Los Angeles. One of the men he built a home for, a man named Kevin, said something that stopped Summers completely. He said, "That key you gave me to open that door, it reminded me what I was worth. Not the roof, not the walls, the key. A tent does not have a key. A shelter cot does not have a key. But a door with a lock gives a person something no government program can manufacture, the physical experience of ownership. A space in the world that is yours." That is what a $190 porta-potty conversion provides that a $700,000 government unit takes years to deliver. Not luxury, just a key. After Elvis Summers built those 37 tiny homes, after the videos went viral, after strangers started calling to ask how they could help, the city of Los Angeles sent sanitation workers to confiscate 3 of his tiny homes right off the sidewalk. A spokesperson called the structures a safety hazard and said people would be better off in official shelters. This was the same city spending $700,000 per unit on permanent supportive housing. The same city whose shelter system had waiting lists stretching months into the future. The same city where tens of thousands slept on pavement every single night. Their response to a man spending his own money to give people a locked door and a dry roof was to send a truck and haul his work to the dump. Protests followed. The city eventually returned the seized structures. Summers kept building. Through the Tiny House Project, he has since built hundreds of shelters, from basic $500 emergency units to fully finished tiny houses with kitchens, bathrooms, and electricity. But this pattern repeated in city after city. In some cities, a volunteer crew could build a complete tiny home in a weekend, but the permit process took 18 months. In some jurisdictions, the permit fee alone cost more than the home itself. On one side, ordinary Americans putting a roof over a neighbor's head. On the other, a system that moves slowly, spends enormously, and produces results a volunteer with a truckload of plywood can outperform on a Saturday afternoon. Does this actually work in real weather? In rain, in cold, in a Vermont winter where temperatures drop below zero? The answer is yes. A carpenter named Derek Diedrichson had been building micro-shelters from pure garbage for years. Shipping pallets, discarded storm windows, old kitchen cabinets, and testing them through New England winters where cold is a survival condition. His structures cost under $200, some under $100. Dry, warm enough, lockable, survivable in conditions that kill people sleeping in tents. He hosted workshops for over 15 years, teaching people who had never held a circular saw to finish a weatherproof shelter in a single weekend. The New York Times covered him. NPR covered him. HGTV covered him. The skills required to house a person are not specialized. The materials are already everywhere. In Seattle, the Low Income Housing Institute built 18 tiny house villages. Over 325 homes donated by volunteers, students, and churches. At one event, 400 volunteers built 30 tiny homes in a single day. A Girl Scout troop built one themselves. They furnished it with a bed, a comforter, a dresser, and artwork. Then they tucked boxes of Girl Scout cookies into the dresser drawer for whoever moved in. A stranger they would never meet, whose first night in a real home they had decided to make a little warmer. Since 2022, over 6,000 people in King County have transitioned off the streets. Over 98% were still housed 1 year later. Compare that to Los Angeles. The city spent $300 million and saw 40% of the people they placed return to the streets within a year. 98% success versus 40% failure. Numbers tell you the scale. People tell you the truth. In Detroit, Cass Community Social Services launched a rent-to-own program where formerly homeless residents pay modest rent for 7 years and then own the home outright. No mortgage, no bank approval, no credit score, just 7 years of showing up. In December 2025, a man named D'Angelo signed the deed to his house. A man who once had nothing, no address, no lease, no key, now holds a legal deed with his own name on it. Not renting, not on a waiting list, an owner in America. In 2025, that is what happens when you give a person not just a roof, but a pathway. In Nashville, Pastor Jeff Obafemi Carr raised $67,000 to build a tiny home community behind Green Street Church, painted in bright yellows, blues, and purples with red doors. A resident named Peter said, "It is a lot better than living in a tent." In Santa Clarita, more than 100 children between 9 and 11 spent an entire school year helping build a 28-foot tiny home. They sawed planks, installed insulation, raised plywood walls. Children learning fractions in the morning were learning that a home is something you can build with your own hands. In Los Angeles in 2026, a formerly homeless man named Madanu started selling homes on wheels to other unhoused people for $150 each. A woman walked past mid-build and left a $100 deposit without asking a single question. No nonprofit, no grant, just tools, materials, and the knowledge of what it feels like to have nothing between yourself and the cold ground. There are still 745,000 Americans outside tonight, not as a statistic, as people. 750,000 people with no door to close behind them, no key in their pocket, no dry place that belongs to them alone. Among them, 150,000 children. 31,000 veterans who came home from wars this country sent them to fight and wound up sleeping under bridges on the way to the VA that kept turning them away. The permits will keep taking 18 months. The billion-dollar plans will keep stalling at year 3. But a man in Los Angeles looked at a plastic box headed for a landfill and saw a bedroom inside it. A musician spent $500 so a grandmother named Smokey could stop sleeping in the dirt. A Girl Scout troop put cookies in a drawer for a stranger they will never meet. A formerly homeless man named Madanu builds $150 homes in a parking lot because he knows exactly what it costs a person, not in dollars, but in everything else, to spend one more night without a roof. And somewhere tonight, a man named Kevin is holding a key. Not a metaphor, an actual key that opens an actual door, a door to a space that belongs to him. And when he turns that key and steps inside and closes the door behind him, he is not just getting out of the cold. He is being told, in the only language that reaches a person after years of being invisible, Not words, not pamphlets, not a caseworker's clipboard, but in the weight of a brass key in the palm of his hand. That he is worth something. That he exists. That there is a place in this world with his name on it. That is what $190 buys. That is what a retired porta-potty and one person who decided to stop walking past can do. The question has never been whether it is possible. Every number in this video proves it is. The question has always been the same. How many more people are we willing to walk past before we decide we are done?